When our world turns upside down, how do we separate or identify our own self when we're wrestling with despair? Despair is simply a part of life. Some things happen when our world turns upside down, and it's not only easy, it makes sense that despair becomes a companion that we wrestle with. But here's the thing. No matter where we happen to be, no matter what is happening in our life, the seasons will change. We don't know what the weather is going to be like, but the season will change. Do we always want to be with this despair? No. When we're wrestling with despair, hope seems like it's this lighthouse that's 14,000 miles away. It's not even on the horizon yet. It's impossible to see it. And that is where sometimes we must engage a sense of will in acknowledging that right now, this story that I'm in will not always be my story. It will feel fake to say it. It will feel like you're giving yourself a line. But I am not always going to be here deeply despairing in the midst of this global pandemic when nothing I'm hearing either makes sense or is comforting, and everything is frightening. It is really hard to imagine that I will not always be here wrestling with this despair. But I'm not always going to be here. You're not always going to be where you are. And the hard work is distinguishing between myself and the story. There's the story of the news. There's the story of the event. There's the story of the thing that happened to you or to any of us. And the story hurts and it aches. And it's like a muscle that we have to exercise. I am not always going to be here. And from this place, it's hard to imagine 10 years from now. It's hard to imagine 10 minutes from now. But I'm going to imagine my life separate from this story. And the mind's going to want to grab onto it. It's going to want to hold on. And it's going to want to say, no, you don't understand this thing. You're really worried about this thing. You have to be upset about this thing. And while that's true, we're not always going to be here. Even if I don't believe it, even if it's hard for me to imagine that I'm not always going to feel this distressed and this despairing about the world, there is still that rebellious part of me that does hold onto that glimmer of hope that human beings can be decent and that we can make a choice for hope, for nobility. Even if that little tiny part of me feels as tiny as this bear, still, I will seek to separate myself, even a little tiny part of myself, from this story that I've glommed onto. That little space between yourself and this story can be a little spot where you can breathe, where your entire identity doesn't need to be defined by this story. It will take time. It will be hard work. It will feel like you're giving yourself a line because it feels like this story is the entirety of everything. You are not your story. You are not this story. You are not the despair that you feel. Not going to lie, I'm talking to myself as much as anybody else. And in that space, breathe. Because these stories are present, they're part of what make up our tapestry. And we will not always be here. We will not always be here. I'm Catherine Gabriel-Jones. I am an encouragement coach. Breathe. I believe that each of us can find that space, that gap between ourself and the story. I believe in you.